Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm José.
And we've just come back from the MAC, where we've seen the first screening of this year's Screening Rights Film Festival in Birmingham.
Mm-hmm.
The film is Permission from Iran, which came out last year, or the year given on IMDb is 2018, and it'll be one of these films that's making its way around. It's about a female footballer in Iran, indoor footballer, who captains her national team, and when they get through to the final of the Asia Cup, I think, in Malaysia, she can't go because her husband has banned her from leaving the country, which is something he's legally allowed to do.
That's right.
So
that's how the film begins.
So that's the start of the film. Yeah. After the film, you chaired a discussion about it.
Yes, I chaired a discussion with Riham Sheble and Saeed Zeydabadi-Nejad from the University of London. He's written a very interesting book called The Politics of Iranian Cinema. And actually, between Riham and Saeed, the conversation, it led to a really interesting conversation where kind of all of the audience got involved, and which I think really enriched my understanding of the film.
Yeah, I agree.
So
Rihan's focus is Egyptian cinema.
On Egyptian cinema, yeah. But together, I think they really incited a really interesting discussion that I think really started off the Screening Rights Film Festival on a really high note. So, because this was the opening film of that festival, and if the discussion keeps up, then it will be truly excellent, because the whole point of this festival is to raise awareness through cinema about kind of human rights issues across the world. And here, basically, the film focuses on the condition of women and how they're oppressed by a particular type of patriarchy that gives men all of the power in the culture.
Yeah. The film is written and directed by Sohail Beragi, who's a director I'd not heard of before. This is his second feature.
Yes, I'd not heard of him either.
And the star, who plays Afrooz, the central character, the footballer who can't leave the country, is played by Baran Kosari, who again I'd not heard of, but Saeed was talking about how she was really the kind of driving force behind the film.
Yes,
she wanted to tell this story, and she's a star. So it's down to her that the film got made. Is what he seemed to be suggesting. I thought it was a really interesting film, and I'm very glad that I've seen it. Very early on in the film, when the kind of the drama is set up, that they're at the airport, that all the team is going to go to Malaysia, and she hands her passport over, and she's told by a nameless, faceless sort of customs guy you can't see, you can't go. Your husband has put the block on. Yes. Like immediately, it's a real pit in the stomach feeling, because they've been having such a good time up till then. The film opens on them winning their semi-final to get to the final, and they're having such a great time. And they're just these group of young girls really having a giggle, having a laugh, enjoying their lives. And the injustice is so obvious. There's not even a question that this is wrong morally.
Could you imagine the reverse? Could you imagine if David Beckham, was going to captain England, and Posh said, "No, you can't go," and that means he misses, the World Cup final? It's unthinkable.
Yeah, it is. It's absolutely unthinkable. And one of the things that was brought up in the discussion that I think is an interesting point is that the husband, for the first sort of half hour of the film, is not a figure that you see. He's ominous by his lack of presence, and it's the effect that he has on Afrooz that is sort of it makes it scarier by his absence. That he's this powerful. He doesn't even have to be there. She's trying to call him. He's blocked her number. She goes to where he lives. He's not there. And actually, when you sort of first quote unquote see him, when you don't actually see him, he's in a giant black 4x4 ramming her tiny little Peugeot 206.
He's out to kill her or something.
Yeah, it's terrifying. It's real sort of horror movie stuff at that point. Eventually, he physically comes into the picture, and discussions start to happen and things. So I suppose. So go on. What did you make of it? What do you think was most interesting?
Well, I think there were a lot of points that were brought on in the discussion. So basically, to take up from where you left off, she tries to call them, can't find them. She talks to the organizers to make an exception for her. She is, after all, the captain of this team that is at the World Finals. So can't an exception be made for her? The answer is no. So the manager of the football team, or the woman who is very high up anyway, tells her to go and negotiate with her husband, and she says something like, "You're a woman, you can convince him. Kind of be soft, right? Be womanly." And basically, kind of, she tries to do that. In fact, there's this really. Riham said that that the scene that made her most uncomfortable in the film is just a simple one, where Afrooz goes to talk to her husband, really submits to everything that he wants, and then the scene that you're not shown, and then you're not shown a lot, but then there's this scene where she's brushing her teeth viciously, right, and you really get the feeling that she's been violated, that, her husband probably forced her to, kind of have oral sex with him, and that she's disgusted with herself and with the whole situation, but kind of she's done her best, to get him to change his mind. And then kind of what you're shown after is they go to a lawyer, he agrees to let her go, and then spitefully tears up the agreement in front of her face as soon as they've left the lawyer's office. So kind of, the film progresses and it gets worse and worse. It's like a real melodrama in the sense that, this woman has only one desire: to represent her country, right? As captain, she's earned this right to do so. It's taken her 11 years, she said, to get to that point. And just at the moment of triumph, her husband forbids it because he can.
Yeah.
So.
And this is a husband, I suppose we should also say, they've been separated for a year, and he has a kind of bruised ego. And you get the feeling that although it's very obvious that the law is unjust and really should not allow this, you get the feeling that there is a kind of give and take in the relationship where he may have some justification for feeling neglected or something like that. So I think there is this kind of bruised ego thing coming in where everything was fine until I became captain of the national team, and all of a sudden now I'm too good. Now he can't handle it. So there's an element of that which is pretty unfair. But there is also this thing about her lying to him about having gone to this therapist who said we need 6 months apart, and then she turned it into a year. Turns out even the therapist didn't even exist. Yeah. So there's been some wrongdoing on her part, it seems. Yeah,
you get the sense that there's a reason for the conflict from both sides, but you also are very clear at all times that the law, is completely behind him, and that he has got absolute power where she has almost none at all.
Yeah, and he's able to use the law as a weapon.
That's right, against her.
Yeah.
So actually, it's a very powerful film, and I think, with a lot of Iranian melodrama, really, it's quite restrained, and also it's quite indirect. So the things that are most powerful in the film are those that are suggested or not shown, or that in a way you could disavow, right? So kind of. You see her brushing your teeth. You don't see her being violated, right? Also, her best friend, whom she's been roommates with, is a woman. So there's a really strong suggestion, as you pointed out, that there's a lesbian relationship there, right? And that's kind of, part of what's being unspoken. Yeah. So I think the film is very good at kind of connoting all of these things. And making them absolutely clear without quite showing them.
Yeah, because as you say, the censorship wouldn't allow some things. It's very much like, in fact, exactly the same as kind of Hays Code period Hollywood, where you had to codify things, you had to suggest things. Because to the point where when I brought up the possibility of a romantic relationship between the two girls in the discussion, I was kind of saying maybe, is there a possibility I'm reading too much into this? Because there are certain things about it. As Riham said, the thing is, everything that these two girls get up to together is something that you would expect straight women to get up to together. Like women hang out together in Iran, they're encouraged to. There's a very strong kind of separation between men and women kind of socially in the country. So the kind of things they get up to, even living together, is not something that you would automatically read a romantic relationship into. So, it's definitely something that you can read into the film, especially, I suppose, with the idea that she's separated from her husband, and she is kind of an active participant in separating from her husband. She's the one who wants to be separated. But it's not something that is kind of set in stone. And if you're the filmmaker and you want to deny that to a censor, you're absolutely able to, because you just say, no, this is just two women hanging out. This is they're friends.
Exactly, but it's very, very strongly suggested.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think the film makes a very powerful argument for how, women are oppressed by this type of situation where kind of all of the law is, behind the man in this one particular issue, which is that women need men's permission to leave the country to travel, right? So I think Saeed said, well, in some ways, obviously, it's kind of like a middle class problem. Yeah, that kind of only people who have the money to leave the country face this problem, but nonetheless, they face it, right?
Yeah. Like if you were worse off than these women, then you'd be like, well, that's a nice problem to have, but it's a real problem.
But it's a real problem, and it highlights what maybe other, less well-to-do women nonetheless face, which is kind of, a situation which is kind of demonstrably unfair and unjust, and which kind of, shifts the power onto men, and in which leaves women very little option but to submit, really. And I think one of the things that the film is so interesting about is that she doesn't submit. She fights, and she fights right to the end, really.
I suppose I was disappointed by her teammates for not sticking up for her. I could see the manager of the team, this woman who, as you were suggesting or asking in the discussion, is she a villain? It certainly does have that aspect. And actually, she reminded me kind of the Aunt Lydia character in The Handmaid's Tale. The sort of the woman who is, I don't know, is Uncle Tom the right word? Like a spokesman for the men. She's on their side, and keeps other women down.
Well, exactly. I mean, I do think that she can be regarded as the villain, or a villain, in the piece. I mean, just structurally, right? Like, I think there are 4 main women in the film, 4 main roles, right? One is her colleague, her teammate, who might also be her lover, right? The other one is the lawyer who's trying to fight for her rights, and the other one is this woman who's got all this power in the organization. She's like, part manager and part chaperone of the women's team, right?
Yeah.
Who's clearly got contacts everywhere, who actually can make things happen or, forbid things from happening, right? And who's kind of, for various reasons, working against the protagonist.
Yeah, she refuses to help, and that she could. She does enjoy power in the position that she has.
That's right.
I think her position is kind of clear, but the rest of her teammates leave, and the last you see of them is in the airport at the start.
That's at the very beginning of the film.
That's the very beginning, and right at the end of the film, because what happens is the one teammate stays behind, the one who is her roommate / possible lover. She stays behind to be with her, and eventually is talked into joining the team by the manager, who says, someone's going to take Afrooz's place. We can make you a starter. No more starting on the bench for you, because she's a substitute normally. And she eventually decides to leave. And, their relationship is an interesting one. They've had their conflicts a long way, but they're clearly very close. And when she's kind of getting her stuff together to leave for the airport, Afrooz is, I think, upset and probably feels a bit betrayed, but also understands. Like it was a subtle scene, I thought. Subtle scene, the way that was played between the two of them. And one of the things she says is, thank all the other teammates. Thank all the other members of the team for not even sending me a text.
You can imagine how that would be dangerous as well. Yeah. Yes. So one of the conversations that, that woman who runs the team has with the teammate is, show me all your emails, show me all your messages, right? Or I've seen your messages. Yeah, kind of show them. Yeah, so
Yes, that's right.
So it's not a society where people are free to act according to their wishes. There are all kinds of social, constraints, and certainly kind of legal ones. And this film is just about one aspect of them. Yeah, the refusal of husbands, or the control that husbands have over their wives traveling out of the country, and the repercussions of all of that, but also kind of what that signifies in all other kinds of areas. So I think the women not texting her teammates not texting her, can't just be seen as a lack of support. It can also be seen as a demonstration of great fear.
Yeah. Yeah, and I suppose it strengthens the reading of Afrooz's relationship with her teammate as a romantic one, because she doesn't go with the rest of the team. She has the confidence to stay behind. There's a reason she wants to do that.
I thought at the moment when they were in the airport, I thought, okay, something will happen and she'll go. That's one possibility.
Is this right at the start or at the end?
At the end.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah, so when she goes to say goodbye to her teammate, who may also be her lover, I thought in a typical romantic kind of, Hollywood ending, someone would show up and get her on the plane.
Yeah.
Right? And then when that didn't happen, and she's going up these stairs, I thought, oh my God, no, she's going to commit suicide.
Oh, really?
Yes.
That didn't occur to me.
I thought that was a possibility. That's when all the women were singing in church.
Yeah.
And you realize that she's going up, but actually she's going up to a church. I thought she might be going up, to the roof or something. And then, of course, at the end, she humiliates her husband in his own show.
Yeah, he's the television presenter, and she calls in.
That's right.
I must say, it was intercut. Them at the airport and her saying goodbye to a friend was intercut with the husband watching footage of her games on TV, like watching it back, and then getting ready to go out. And it wasn't clear exactly what he was doing, and I thought that might be him having a change of heart and going to the airport to give her the right to
I thought that
go.
was a possibility. But actually what you end up realizing is that his last guest is a shooting champion, who's won all these international awards.
She's been at the Olympics.
Yeah, and an Olympic medal winner, who is a mother and whose husband is very at ease with her achievements and so on, right? So, kind of he's looking at footage of his own wife achieving equally, right? But you eventually see that actually it's in preparation for this other interview rather. Yeah, though it also has a connotation of a desire or a long, the footage is shown in slow motion, so it is an admiring look, at her playing.
Was it slow motion?
I
didn't
thought
think
so.
it was.
Oh.
But I think it's just a slow sort of shot, because the only thing moving is the telly. He's just sat there sort of looking at it.
Oh, perhaps, yeah.
But it has that feeling to it.
Yes.
I agree.
I mean, he's an interesting character because clearly, I think he does have a desire for her, but it's also a desire to dominate. And his desire to dominate is inextricable from his desire for her, which is why she finds it so unacceptable. And he behaves completely brutally. At the beginning, he tries to kill her. Yeah. Then he leads her on. He rapes her. He kicks her out of the house she lives in, rendering her homeless, really. Yeah. And then he's smugly sitting in this nostalgia show at the end, which is really, I imagine, an image also of conservatism, right? He's playing kind of nostalgic music, and it's like, I forget what the show is called, but something like In the Good Old Times or something like that.
Good Old Days, I think.
Yeah.
Is that what it was?
So,
Yeah, and I think the really powerful thing about the ending, because ultimately at the end she's not allowed to go. She loses in court, so she's not able to get a divorce. She's not able to force the court to let her go or anything like that. She basically loses all the kind of legal aspects of the battle. But she calls to the show, and she says, on air, how can you have this woman on and praise her for being such a wonderful sports person and wife? He literally introduced her as, what is it like to be a wife, a mother, and an athlete, and excel at all three? That's how he introduced her. And so when Afrooz rings up and says, how can you have this woman on and praise her for all this stuff, but you're so uncomfortable with your own wife's athletic achievements? He gets embarrassed or humiliated and claims that the connection's bad and ends the show. And that's the end of the film. Yeah. So that's kind of her victory. Whatever that, I'd be interested to see how that sort of developed.
Yes, though there was a title card after that said 15 women.
I think it was eight athletes have been denied exit by their husbands from Iran, and countless others. We don't know an exact figure for women who aren't athletes, but just any women.
Yeah, and what year did they mention? Was it 2015?
Oh, I don't know.
Okay, I'm just.
But that was in a year, wasn't it? Yeah.
So, so it means that Afrooz's problem is a social problem, and therefore, I thought this was kind of a wonderful beginning for a festival that is about kind of human rights. It's about kind of rights kind of worldwide, and I think it kind of illustrates, kind of the condition of women, the oppression of women, and kind of the restraints of an extremely kind of patriarchal culture, very vividly.
Well, I think it's partially the women's rights issue, which is completely apparent, but the specific women's rights issue here is one of freedom of movement.
Yes.
Which also occurred to me, and that throughout the world is not so closely tied to gender.
Yes.
We have our own sort of attitudes to freedom of movement in this country at the moment.
That's right.
I
hadn't made that connection, but that's a very good one.
Yeah, it really occurred to me. I suppose the difference here is people in this country who don't want freedom of movement want to stop people coming in as opposed to leaving.
Yes.
But it's still about it's still about control.
Yeah.
But the one other thing that I was going to talk about that phone call that she makes at the end is that throughout the film she's been told shut up, basically, particularly by the coach of the team, the Aunt Lydia character. Keep it quiet. We'll deal with it internally, that sort of thing. Because right at the start, even before any of this happened, she was on her phone doing a live stream with the team in the changing room before the match, semi-final, and the manager goes, no, not having that, but it's only when she sort of does take to social media again a little bit later, and then the lawyer speaks to Voice of America, which is that a radio show, I think.
Must
not
be,
sure, but it's something like that. That's when sort of, I suppose that's when pressure starts to be applied.
Yes.
Really.
So part of the crime,
when you keep it inside, you can avoid feeling that pressure.
Yes. Part of the problem is bringing international attention to an internal Iranian issue.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which kind of is also homologous to kind of bringing outside attention to what happens within a family. Right, so kind of, the film is making connections between that, I think, in interesting ways.
Yeah, the attitude of the coach is basically don't air your dirty laundry in public.
That's right.
But this is kind of dirty laundry that really needs to be aired in public, because if it's kept inside, it can be ignored and will be ignored. Yeah. And that's exactly what they're trying to do. So, although she loses out, ultimately she can't play in the final, she can't join the team, she is able to use her voice to humiliate her husband for what he's done.
Cinematically, kind of, what did you think of the film?
I suppose I didn't feel it had an awful lot of flair. I think there were scenes. The scene where the husband is ramming the car was scary, but there was something about it that I felt could have been atmospherically stronger. But actually, because I was thinking, I wish I had more of a sense of the danger that they're under in terms of driving. Because the thing is that the danger from behind them, the car being rammed, is very clear, and that kind of scary image of the car being so huge in comparison to their small car. But the danger of them having to speed away through busy streets is not so clear, and I wanted more of a sense of that. But then what Riham said about the camera being, I think it was Riham, talking about the camera being inside the car with them and not being outside means that you get this sense of, although they're moving constantly, they're trapped, which I thought was an interesting idea. So I mean, I think that scene could still have been a little better, but I that was an interesting idea that I hadn't considered, and I really liked the scene, the kind of arbitration scene,
the courtroom scene.
Yeah, so with the husband on the right, and then a couple of seats away, the lawyer, and then Afrooz, and sort of behind the camera, you never see him, is the judge, and it's a long take. It's probably a 5-minute take.
Yeah,
and it just sits there.
Yes,
and they have this discussion.
It's a shot that made us all think about Asghar Farhadi's The Separation,
which I've still not seen.
Which is brilliant, and you know that scene is very much recalls that really.
What happens in a separation? I've not seen it.
Well, The Separation is about a woman trying to divorce her husband.
Yeah.
Right. And kind of, you see it basically, from both of their perspectives. They have a child, they live together. It's kind of much more complex and kind of less clear cut than this one. Yeah. It's kind of, it's more subtle because, there's kind of real love between the characters. Also, they're taking care of the husband's elderly father. Yeah, so it's kind of tied in with all of these emotional kind of entanglements and ambiguities. This is much more straightforward and straight cut. It's just wrong, right?
Yeah. Well, this is really about power.
Yeah. And
also about image, I think, particularly with the husband, the way he wants to be seen, because he doesn't want to admit to feeling sort of overtaken by his wife. Because even that would be humiliating. So he ends up kind of falling back on, this is just my right. But he does say things like, he does talk about the thing about the therapist, his wife inventing this therapist as an excuse to separate from him, which is like, it's a reasonable sort of thing to be upset about, but for him what it is really is a convenient way of justifying his decision, when it's not really about that.
Yeah, but it's also unreasonable. I mean, you could say, you hurt my feelings by doing that, but not, I'm going to stop you from the greatest moment of your life.
Yeah. It remains a disproportionate response. But the point is, it's a form of justification, even if it is disproportionate. It's a thing he can talk about,
Yes.
Because without that, he would really just have nothing, and he would just be saying, no, this is just my decision, and you're going to have to just live with it, which he also says.
Yeah, but it's made very clear in the film that even though he has the right to do what he has, it's very unreasonable to exercise it, and it's very wrong to exercise it.
Yeah, no, there's no way in which the film... one of the questions that I sort of asked in the discussion was, is the film trying to kind of complexify or complicate the morality? And I think it's obvious that it isn't. So when it gives the husband when it gives him reasons behind what he's doing, or justifications, or what he thinks are justifications, I don't think there's any way of saying that the film is suggesting that there is a moral right in what he's doing. There absolutely isn't, and the film is 100% legally behind Afrooz, completely. I mean, I don't think that scene is... Well, okay, I haven't seen a separation, so I'm not comparing it to a separation in terms of its complexity, but I don't think it's simple. I think to our eyes, it's so obvious what the legal decision should be, or rather, it's so obvious that the law is wrong. But I do think that scene is complex, because it is still about... There are complexities in these characters' relationships and the arguments that they make, and I think it's a really brilliantly written and performed scene, because it has ebbs and flows, and they shout and they get quieter and they talk about different things, and every response that a character has to someone else's point is reasonable. Not reasonable necessarily, but makes sense. The dialogue moves in an organic way.
Well, I think you can understand his point of view while seeing him as really unreasonable and exercising brute power.
Yes.
And I think the film's complexities come from other elements, and actually not from, trying to make the husband into, a good person who has his reasons. After all, he is somebody who's tried to kill her, who's raped her, and has kicked her out of her own home. Right? The film does not side with him. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But anyway, kind of, let's wrap it up. I actually thought that this was a brilliant film with which to begin this particular film festival, really. You know, it kind of, you know, it is very much about kind of social issues and about human rights and about kind of women's rights. And certainly, I think it led to a wonderful discussion on all of those issues.
Yeah, I think it's a really promising start to the festival. And I would say that it's a really enjoyable film.
Yes.
Maybe that's something that we should...
we should underline that.
Do you agree?
Sure, I do agree. Yes.
Like, it's an enjoyable watch.
Yes.
Right? I think partly it's the quality of the storytelling and the performances. That, you know, I want to see more of these people. I want to see them interacting, which is great. And I think when the drama gets sort of heightened and people get kind of upset and angry, particularly in that courtroom scene, I think there's some really, really emotionally sort of strong moments.
Yes.
That I loved.
Great. So we both recommend it. Do see it if you get a chance. You know, it's playing again at the Screening Rights Film Festival. But if you don't get to see it there, it's a film that will be available on video on demand, and I highly recommend it.
Yeah, cracking movie. Enjoyed it.
All right.
And thank you to the Screening Rights Film Festival for putting it all together, and thank you for hosting that talk.
You're welcome. So this is Eavesdropping at the Movies, and we are on
iTunes, SoundCloud, YouTube, and Spotify to listen to. Our social media is Facebook and Twitter at Eavesdrop Movies, and our website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Thank you very much for listening.
Cheerio.